And there we are. We're live. So, Chuck, this time it's going to work, right? We had an abortive attempt yesterday to record an interview, and don't know whether it was. Well, let's just blame me because that's easier that way.
Yeah, so, I'm good at blaming other people, so I'm cool with that.
Yeah. So, thanks for taking the time to redo this whole thing, and hopefully it'll be, even if it's half as interesting as last time, it'll still be awesome because you were a great person to have on. So Chuck Seegert, first time design, right?
Yes, sir. This is my first official design. I've developed like race games and different kinds of stuff just for my family and friends, but
right.
This is my first official attempt at actually doing the work of designing a game.
And so you're a huge fan of Corsair Leader and the Leader series from DBG Games, and from our conversation yesterday, why don't you share with us a little bit about how you got the idea and got excited about the concept of Zero Leader, and maybe preamble that with just and I'll try and keep you honest, a brief summary of what Corsair Leader is about as a solitaire war game.
Okay. Yeah, I've been since I was a kid. I've always been interested in World War II aircraft in particular. So when the game Corsair Leader came out, that was very, very exciting for me. And I was a huge proponent of that, got involved right away. Got to meet Kevin, Sarah, and Dan at DVG Games. Awesome people, whole lot of fun. Started talking to them about repping their games at different game conventions, that kind of things. And it just came along, and I notified Kevin that I'd be interested in doing a mirror image of Corsair Leader called Zero Leader, which looks at the Pacific Air War from the Japanese point of view. And Kevin was on board instantly, and we've had a blast working our tails off to put this game together.
Right. Now, so tell folks a little bit about Corsair Leader, and what you do, how does it work as a solitaire game, and what's the premise behind the game. I've only played Phantom Leader and enjoyed that immensely. Be curious to hear how the World War II stuff works, and what some of the things that are unique attributes of the Leader series that might make people excited about this.
Okay. Yeah, the Leader series is by itself excellent. I mean, it's a great way of making a very complicated situation easy enough to play. They're not considered simulations in any way, shape, or form. One of my favorite words, and I got a few of them from Kevin, but one of my favorite words is crunchy. It's crunchy enough to be fun and entertaining, but it's not, you got to spend 6 months reading the rule books. So the difference between Corsair Leader and, say, Phantom Leader, Corsair Leader, World War II, far less special weapons, those types of things. And the big thing with Corsair Leader is it added maneuvering so that two fighter planes actually can maneuver against each other, which is very difficult to do with an AI solitaire type game. So what I did is I took Corsair Leader and turned it on its head, and added a few things that I really wanted to branch into that I didn't think Corsair Leader really covered well enough. None of the Leader series as far as aircraft are concerned. Like in Phantom Leader, if you're flying an F4F or an F105, F100, doesn't matter, basically. If you have similar pilots, they're going to fly similar. In Corsair Leader, same thing. An F4F and an F4U or an F6F late war fly very similar depending upon the type of pilot you have. Well, in Zero Leader, that's completely different. I mean, even an Oscar and a Zero, A6M2, which are same time frame, fly differently because an Oscar is more maneuverable, and a Zero is more maneuverable than the later war aircraft, which lost a little bit of maneuverability but gained in robustness. These are real simple little things that I added that I think make the game very exciting, but and a lot more fun, but don't add tons of complication. They don't make you have to look at spreadsheets and do all this type of stuff to feel that different.
That's a tough balance to maintain, right?
Yes. Kevin and I have been working on it very hard. And, my ideas were a little more complicated. We scaled them back a little bit. Let's make it a little bit more sensible and a little quicker and everything else. And I really believe, based on what I feel, of course, and what my play testers have told me, that the system works very well. It gives you that feeling of flying a zero versus just flying an airplane, okay? One of the other things I did is I added maintenance, which is kind of a background type of thing that most games don't cover. But because we're looking from the Japanese point of view, it's very, very important. They didn't have unlimited resources. They didn't have truckloads of spare parts or wonderful facilities. They had to work and scrounge and do all this kind of stuff to keep their aircraft flying, and they succeeded in doing it. And I added a mechanic into the system, pardon the pun, but I added a mechanic into the system that actually makes that happen, makes you feel it, makes you understand the difficulties, and it adds decisions, again, without you having to go through tons of spreadsheets and doing all this kind of stuff. It's a simple mechanism that adds that detail.
Yeah, so yesterday when we spoke, you talked about this mechanic, this mechanic, that you mentioned that in a campaign game, you'll have these choices that you may need to make in terms of refit and other things, and that could that's going to, so you having a richer set of decisions you need to make, right?
Yes. What it does, and one of the problems with solitaire games is typically the lack of decision. It's basically roll a dice and consult a chart. Well, the leader systems have already made it, so you've got to make decisions and everything else. I just took that a little bit further. Some real decisions that are affecting your play game, your gameplay from there on out. In other words, your planes come back from a mission, they have a maintenance needed counter, your mechanics can only repair so many. Now I've got a damaged airplane. Do I repair that damaged airplane and leave 2 airplanes sit with their maintenance still being needed? Right. Or do I replace all the maintenance neededs and leave that airplane damaged that can't fly the next mission? These are all simple little decisions that just add that extra layer, I feel, to the game to make it that much more fun without adding a ton of time to it.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges, as you mentioned, with solitaire games is the lack of decision making, right? The lack of richness. You may get a cool narrative, which can be great, but if you don't get to, you're playing the game for the AI, and one of the things I like about the Flight Leader series in particular is that there are a rich set of decisions that go just beyond what kit am I going to take with me. It's more, there's a lot more to it than just that. So I think that's pretty cool. And if you're adding some more layers to that, then that's good as well.
Yep. Yeah, and the key is when you talk about adding layers, you don't want to add layers just for the sake of layers. I mean, I've been a gamer since the very early 70s, and Avalon Hill back then, it just seemed like they added more and more complication just to make it more and more complicated. And I've tried very, very hard not to do that. I've added some layers to the game that actually help the game. Don't do added trouble. Just
right. And so a couple of quick things. Are you getting a little bit of feedback on your line?
Yes, I'm seeing them, but I'm old and slow, so I can't respond to them. So I appreciate
I'll take care of that. But are you getting any audio feedback? Is what I was referring to. Are you hearing an echo?
I am not hearing anybody talking other than myself.
Other than you,
typical for me. But
all right, okay. So but if you do that, just if you've got like YouTube running on the side or whatever, just mute it. Otherwise, we'll get feedback in the post replay. So John Longshore, who's a longtime Big Board subscriber, follower, guy, has a question. So he's asking, is this Pearl Harbor-ish, early 41, 42, or is it 43, 44? And I thought, here's a layup question for you, right? So
if you can bring up my share screen, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
John, thank you for the question. Is this more Pearl Harbish, 43, 44, 44, 45? The answer to that question is yes. It's Pearl Harbish, 43, 44, 44, 45. What I'm sharing right now is the counters for the bandits, which is it's a kind of an explanatory thing. But 1941 bandits, you've got F4Fs, P40s, P39s, that type of stuff. And they're not really like an average one. Here you're looking at an F4F. An average F4F is only a +0 ATA, which when you're flying an A6M2, you should be able to really have fun with that one. But when we go down here a little bit, I got 42 bandits. That's where we add the P38 Lightning, that kind of stuff. Go down here a little bit further here. Let me get to 44, 45, where it's a little more dangerous. Now we start picking up P51 Mustangs, P47 Thunderbolts, F6F Hellcats, and they get a lot more dangerous. These are the no bandit counters for them, but moving up, you look at an F6F average is +2. That's an average one that you're going to run into is a +2. 45s are even worse. They're a little more dangerous. Run into a legendary P51 Mustang, which is a +4 ATA. If you're familiar with the leader series, +4 is an extremely dangerous aircraft.
So ATA, why don't you define that for us?
Yeah, ATA is air to air. So that would be if you're dogfighting this guy.
Okay.
He automatically, if you're a no modifier type pilot, just a totally basic pilot, this P51 gets a +4 to his die shake. And as you can see, a 4 right here, these three numbers, this is stress. If it shakes a 4, 5, or 6, it gives you stress. A 7 would give you damage, and an 8 destroys you. So if this guy's coming at you with a +4, you're going to take a dice, and he's going to give you stress. And
it's a D10 based system, right?
D10 based system. I was just going to say that. You get 4 extra on a D10. You need a 4 or higher in order to be destroyed. So this aircraft is extremely dangerous, a lot more dangerous than the 41, 42s. I also didn't, I don't have them up here right now, but I also added another thing to it, the campaigns, the squadron makeups in the early part of the war, 41, 42, the Japanese squadrons are stronger. And what I did is I took out, if you're familiar with the leader games where you have, say, for a normal campaign, a medium campaign, you have 10 pilots. I removed one of the averages and gave them a veteran early in the war. So your early war squadrons are a little bit stronger than average. 44 and 45, I inversed that. Now you lose an average and you pick up a green. And I also have different, let me see if I can get it. Yeah, this campaign sheet. I hope you can see this now.
Yeah, so maybe, Chuck, if you can just click on the zoom button a little bit and just sort of zoom in a little bit, that'd be great. I think that would help folks. There we go. And we can just scroll around as needed and go from there.
Okay. So this is a campaign sheet, and what I pulled up, this is a 1942 Port Moresby Lay campaign. This is the one I used for play testing. So, and what I did on here is the reinforcements. Now, when you play any of the air leader games, you reinforcements, you lose a pilot, you get a new pilot. Okay, and that pilot matches the skill of the pilot you lost. Well, in my game, early in the war, your reinforcements may be average, like here where it says reinforcements 2, 3, 4, average. So you don't, if you lose a skilled pilot, it doesn't get replaced by a skilled pilot, it gets replaced by an average pilot. And then the 2, 3, 4, that means if you're playing a short campaign, you only have 2 reinforcement pilots, not unlimited like they are in Corsair Leader or anything like that.
Right.
Again, super simple mechanism that reflects the difficulty of being a Japanese versus being American. The lack of facilities, the lack of abilities, everything.
Okay, now so I guess from a historical play perspective, there's another question here from Neil. He's saying, are you going to have a British Naval Air late war as part of the? Let me get rid of that. Part of the operations in the Indian Ocean.
I actually don't have any British Naval Air. What I'm working on right now is a couple of expansions that will pick up bandits such as the Hurricane and everything else. When you look at that, and thank you very much for the question, Neil. When you look at that, you have to put yourself in the mindset that the British are bandits. They're not pilots or anything like that. So I'm working on expansions that are going to get us the Hurricane, the Spitfire, and other aircraft that did find their way into the Pacific theater. So no, there's not really any British pilots, but there are going to be some British bandits that you can shoot down.
There we go. Excellent. And so we have a question here regarding fuel. How is that modeled or worked into a scenario, if it is?
Yep. Actually, in the leader games, fuel really isn't an issue. I mean, you can carry a drop tank, but it's not really super necessary. It's a -1 stress if you keep it on your plane the whole time, which is difficult when you've got a lot of bandits flying around. But that is a level of crunchiness, to use Kevin's word. That's kind of a level of the crunchiness that the leader games don't really go into, because when you're looking at a campaign length, and if you don't mind, I'll bring that back up.
Back up, yeah.
When you're looking at a campaign, you get different lengths. Like here's short, 4 days, medium, 6 days, long, 9 days. So 4 days is actually like 4 missions. And each one is a mission. So fuel really doesn't come into it, because you wouldn't go on the mission if you didn't have enough fuel. Okay. Fuel is not really something that is necessary to be covered, but it's a great question. And never know what's going to happen in the future when consider branching out to different areas.
Hang on one second. Yeah, I have a. All right. So interesting. So I got thrown for a loop here because someone donated some money. I was like, well, my channel's now officially making money. I just wanted to make sure he actually do that. I was like, oh, I'm an internet sensation now. It's like, oh. Anyway, so totally distracted. Got that. That's interesting. One of the things I wanted to talk about as well, because our last conversation we talked about the greening of the Japanese pilots and how that you reflect that in the game, and I think you did a noble job of explaining that there. What about carrier operations? So one of yesterday we talked about the randomness almost of both carrier groups trying to find each other and who could get to the other one first, and would they fly past each other and all this sort of fun stuff. And so how, tell us a little bit about how you're handling that in the game in terms of sort of carrier op scenarios, if there are any, and things of that nature.
Well, absolutely. There are. Now, I apologize because we're not far enough to have the actual maps on these different campaigns. As I'm flipping through, you can see some of the other campaigns. We do have a Pearl Harbor campaign, and we're having a stretch goal is going to be the 7th Carrier campaign. I don't know if you've ever read the book, but a Japanese carrier was trapped in a secret cove until 1983, and then it comes out and attacks Pearl Harbor in 1983, kind of the backside of Final Countdown. But I want to get to my Midway campaign.
That's right. It was the
Midway rails. If you want to blow up British ships, that's going to be there. But if you look at like Midway campaign, and again, these things aren't the right way, but Midway campaign is going to have the carrier, the fleet carriers, and everything else out there as targets. And what happens is, if you look down here, the list of targets. Now, again, we have to update these. These targets are not for the Midway campaign. We're proofing all of this stuff down here first. But when you get this list of targets here, target number 36 is a fleet carrier. So what happens is you get this deck. All these targets are your target deck. So there might be 19, there might be 20 targets or whatever that are going to be in that campaign. And what happens is you may or may not draw a carrier, which means you may or may not find the enemy carrier to attack it. You may attack a battleship or a cruiser, or you may spend a whole midway campaign pounding on the ground because there's ground targets and there's naval targets.
Right.
And you may have to, in midway, you're going to have to defend your carrier because SBDs, TBDs, TBFs are coming at you. We also have other bombers that will come at you in midway, that type of thing. So you're going to be defending and attacking at the same time. So it's very, very cool. But there is, I call it intelligent randomness. There is randomness into what targets you get, but it's not like I've got 600 targets, so my chances of pulling up a carrier are pretty slim. You might have 20 targets, so you have a 1 in 20 chance of a fleet carrier being your target. And the cool thing is, in the rules, if you destroy that fleet carrier, it goes back into your target deck because there was more than one. Okay. On the reverse, if you destroy that carrier, you get a bonus. In other words, the enemy is going to lose, I think it's one bandit. The next mission, there will be one less bandit because you sank a carrier.
Right.
In the reverse, in carrier defense, if you lose a carrier, it hurts you for the next mission or 2 missions or whatever.
Excellent. And so, are there any cap-based scenarios where you're just flying cap versus flying out to go on the offensive? So, are you defending? Can you be defending the carrier type of scenario?
Yes, absolutely. I think I've got that here. I can show you some target cards.
Oh, sweet.
These are all the pilots, by the way, that I got for play testing right now. These are pilots for Zeros, Oscars, Bettys, and
right. Maybe zoom in just a little bit on 1 or 2 so we can get a sort of better look, because the resolution on these streams is pretty ordinary.
Okay. Well, I'll just show you a Zero. Okay. This is an A6M2 Zero pilot. Okay. And what I did, Corsair Leader didn't have MN, which is maneuver.
Right.
That is a bonus. The Zero, when it's maneuvering against, let's say that P-51, that's +4. Well, you've got a maneuver of 1. So now the P-51 is only +3. So that's a good start. The disadvantage is your robustness is -1, which means the enemy firing at you automatically gets to add 1 to their die because the Zero was not very strong of an aircraft. And then the third thing I added is what's called aggression. Aggression is another plus or minus, giving you the option to use 2 dice, kind of an offensive version of evasion. If you're familiar with evasion in the leader games where you get the chance to shake 2 dice if somebody's shooting at you, here you get the chance to shake 2 dice. In this case, it's a dash, which means he doesn't have aggression. This one has a 0, which means he has aggression. So for the cost of 1 stress point, you get to shake 2 dice when you're attacking or maneuvering or the enemy is maneuvering against you. One other cool thing, just if I have 1 second, I know we're heading towards targets. I'll get down there in a second, but I want to show you something. You notice right here on this middle card, Taknibata, we are planning on having the kanji. I have worked with Ben Chi, Al Liss, a couple other guys, to get the kanji for the Japanese names. So there's actually going to be the Japanese name written Western and in kanji on all of the
very cool.
Which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, that'll give it some extra theme. Very nice. So
exactly.
So just now, what are those cards for? There are they?
These are event cards.
Yep, event cards, right?
Okay. I've added some event cards. I've changed them. A lot of the event cards from the previous games, quite honestly, were very American-centric. So I've added some event cards, and I've tried to make them far more Japanese-centric. Mm-hmm. Things like a munition restock. You luckily will get extra SOs that you can spend on your pilots or whatever, that kind of stuff. There's also there's an event card for good islanders or whatever. The idea being friendly islanders. In Corsair Leader, if your pilot is shot down, you perform search and rescue to attempt to find that pilot, bring them back to your squadron. There's not that option in Zero Leader. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the Japanese really didn't have the resources for search and rescue. Most of their battles were over enemy territory. So it was very, very difficult for them. And the other thing was most of the Japanese pilots, especially early in the war, did not wear parachutes. And a lot of people would believe that that was because of their samurai spirit and doing all that kind of stuff, which was part of it. But the other thing was the fighter pilots just felt that it made them too constricted in their cockpits and everything else. So they would actually use them as seat cushions. Samurai Sake talks about that in his book.
Interesting.
Yep. So now we were talking about targets before we got off track.
Yeah.
Now these are prototypes, so please, the wording may change, do all that kind of stuff. But when you talk about CAP, here it is, carrier defense. This is a target where the enemy is coming at you. And I've got two of them. I've got a smaller one where I think it's going to be torpedo bombers that you have to go up against. And there's one bandit in the target area and one bandit in each approach area. This carrier defense is a little more difficult. This one, there's 4 or 5 dive bombers coming, and you have to destroy these. Otherwise, you are going to suffer some penalties. Right now, we just put stress in here as penalties, but I've come up with different penalties to go.
Mm-hmm.
You also, if it's a land-based thing, you've got airfield defense. Same concept, but now you're defending your airfield against dive bombers or whatever. I've also got specific dogfights, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, B-26s, B-25s, and one of my favorites, but it's not the favorite of whoever's flying the game, heavy bombers. Early war, you have B-17s. Late war, you've got B-29s. And they are not fun to go up against.
Yes, it's a wall of lead, right?
Yes.
Interesting. Now, as part of the design process, Chuck, you worked, obviously you had the benefit of having the base system of the Flight Leader series to sort of boost up the base, provide a framework. So, and I guess also from an artistic perspective, you would then leverage off the prior art in terms of format. But what about all the, who did all the artwork? Was that you, or does DVG work with you on that? How does that happen?
I am not super computer literate, so I did the research.
I've noticed that.
You've noticed that, haven't you? And that's why I wanted to practice before we went live. It's been very embarrassing, folks.
It's all good.
But I've been able to I've done this research and everything else. My youngest daughter, Trisha, who is fantastic, she came here and spent days teaching me. She also created some template cards so I could create these cards. But Kevin and Sarah at DVG Games, I have worked with them to become my go-to people for artwork, graphics, doing all that kind of stuff. So they're actually the ones I am deciding on, let's say the maps. I decide on the maps,
right,
where I want the targets, and then they make it actually look legible. Whereas, like you saw those event cards, okay? My daughter and I spent a ton of time just putting together those event cards, give them to Kevin and Sarah, and they clean them up, made them different colors, do that kind of stuff. But so I've had an awful lot of help for
that's good. Yeah,
my daughter and stuff. So, but Kevin and Sarah have really stepped up. They're doing a lot of graphics, and besides teaching me new words like crunchy and goodness, they're doing a lot for me to help.
That's very cool. John, really terrible comment.
I like it.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay. Well, now, in terms of, let's see, I looked at the design process. We've talked about the base game, what I call the Flight Leader series, and talked about some of the. Are there other unique aspects to this system? Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you, so I'm going to come back to that in a second. But are there other unique aspects to this, to Zero Leader compared to Corsair, that you would want to share? And then I have a question for you.
Okay. Well, we've covered an awful lot of them. I mean, the maintenance is huge. I love the maintenance. Corsair Leader didn't have Kamikaze. I have Kamikaze, which is a very interesting mechanic and very useful later in the war when you're really fighting to get through the enemy air screen. I have Oka bombs, that type of stuff, but really the maintenance, the maneuver, robustness,
and also the pilot. It seems like the pilot degradation capability, the capabilities of the pilots wearing out over time to reflect the historical narrative. I think that's important too.
Yep, that is something that. I mean, in Corsair Leader, you have a base squadron, and that's your base squadron throughout. So your squadron never technically gets stronger, even late in the war when it should. But in my game, you are stronger in early war and you're weaker in late war. So it really reflects, again, something super simple. You don't have to go after a spreadsheet or anything like that. It's super simple. It's there and it works. And it makes it far more difficult to be doing home island defense in 1945 than it is doing Pearl Harbor in 41.
Right. And so my question that I remembered I wanted to ask you, yesterday when we had a chat, we talked about how cool it would be to be able to go head to head and have like a campaign and maybe compete against folks who are playing Corsair Leader. So tell me a little bit about your ideas around that and how that came to be, and what does that really mean? Like, how does that help?
I call it a bridge rule, and it's going to be a stretch goal when we go on Kickstarter. Looks like August 11th, by the way. But it's going to be a stretch goal where two players can play. One person plays Corsair, one player plays Zero, okay? And what's going to happen is if the Corsair Leader player, he chooses a target, and the Zero Leader player defends that target. And the cool thing is that you're going to be able to, I'm upping the size of the squadron to give you some extra aircraft, because you choose a mission, you choose your aircraft that go on the mission. Any aircraft that don't go on that mission can replace drawn bandits on the tactical thing. So you can have your Zero Leader card actually up there as a bandit fighting a Corsair Leader card. So your pilot against, so in other words, Derek, look out, because I'm coming at you with my Zero. Derek Case, we tease each other a lot on Corsair Leader, but so I can actually take my pilot and replace a drawn bandit card or bandit counter with my counter and go up there and dogfight. Again, maintenance is going to be important, so you've got to be careful how many of those you use. And the other thing I've done is if you as Corsair Leader come and bomb my targets, there will be an effect for the rest of that campaign on me as the leader. And the reverse is true. If I come and destroy one of your targets, there will be an effect that affects you the rest of that campaign. So it's very, very exciting. It's basically two people playing solitaire games against each other, which I think is a really, really cool idea.
Yeah. So I had an experience at a con once where they had a competition, a solitaire game competition. So it was Hunters, the sub game. And so they put a big chart up on the wall and they kept track of tonnage sunk and types of ships sunk and VPs and all that other business. And I think there were 8 or 10 or 12 folks, and you could play, 1 or 2 days, or you could play the whole con or whatever you wanted to do. But you had guys because they're competing with each other as as submarine captains, trying to see who got the most tonnage and things like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. This sounds even better because it's a little bit more interactive. So that's a cool idea. Yeah,
and that's what I do for Kevin and Sarah. I'm glad you put that question up, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. But that's what I do for Kevin and Sarah is I'm in the Midwest, they're out in California. So any cons or anything like that in this area, I go and I demonstrate these games, Corsair Leader, Down in Flames, all that kind of stuff. And I can't wait to actually get out there and be able to demonstrate, have two people playing, one Zero Leader, one Corsair Leader, going at each other. That's going to be a lot of fun to demonstrate at the cons. Not to mention people playing them after they purchase them or whatever. They bring them themselves and they'll sit there and they'll be playing Warfighter or something. Can't wait to see them playing Zero Leader out on the tables at these conventions that I go to. But as far as Neil's question here, I've got Shinden, I've got Franks, I've got George, I've got Tojo. We've also got I don't know if it's going to be an expansion or what it's going to be, but I call it What If. So you're going to see things like the Japanese had a rocket-powered aircraft in their prototype stage. They had jet aircraft in their prototype stage. You're gonna get the opportunity to fly those. So yes, Shinden, Frank, George, Tojo, they're all going to be in there. Tony, they're all coming. Everything from the Nate on up to the very late war aircraft.
Very cool. So, when you and I first connected on Facebook, and I mentioned that, I felt like I'd known you for a long time, so I see you commenting quite a bit on social media and stuff like that. I wasn't aware that I didn't know you were designing a game, and B, didn't know that you had.
I tried to keep it secret.
Yeah, fascination with Solitaire games. So then when we agreed to have a chat about this, I didn't realize that you were coming up with your Kickstarter soon. So it's going to be August 11th, right?
That is the plan right now. There's a couple little details. Sometimes Kickstarter games are 50% done or doing something like that, and they put them on Kickstarter. Well, my game is 98 to 99% done.
Right.
There's a few details and everything else that Kevin and I are working on. He was celebrating his anniversary this weekend, so we didn't do anything for 2 or 3 days. I'm going into withdrawal. But there's just a couple details that we're working out, but the working plan right now is we'll go on at noon Pacific time on August 11th. We will be hitting Kickstarter live.
Very cool. Very cool. And now in terms of packaging, it's the standard. I only have one. So I own the Phantom Leader game. In fact, a friend of mine gave that to me. So I haven't actually purchased a DBG game yet. So this might be my first one. But yeah, we need to fix that, right? So is it going to be the standard sort of? They have a fairly large box typically. So are you familiar with the packaging arrangements? What's going to happen with that?
Talk about details, but yeah, that's something that we're working on right now because of the number of counters, cards, all this kind of stuff that we're actually getting into there. It's going to look like pretty much. Well, I got one right here.
Perfect.
It's going to look
nice.
Something like this. Corsair Leader, very thick, very heavy because there's going to be a ton of stuff in this game.
It seems like the. You've already got a lot of very interesting scenarios / campaigns that you can play through. So that look, there's more than a dozen missions on some of those campaigns. So it looks like there's a lot of game to play there.
Yeah, I agree. I actually, I've got, I think 16 or 17 base campaigns. Plus, I'm working on a Burma campaign, so you can actually face the AVG, the American Volunteer Group, or Flying Tigers, as they were called. I am working on an Australian campaign. So that's where the Hurricanes and Spitfires are coming in. I'm working on the Australian campaign where the Japanese were going after Darwin, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the Japanese were pretty centralized, so there's not a lot of expansion area, that kind of stuff, but I am working on that. So there's going to be a ton of stuff to play.
That's very cool. So let's see, we're in 40 minutes here. So I want to be respectful of your time and obviously
I appreciate it.
viewers he was get bored after about 30 minutes. So rather than striptease and stuff like that, we'll just try to keep it succinct. But were there other things that you wanted to share about the game that you were particularly excited about? Or obviously any exhortations to support the Kickstarter? It's kind of like your promo slot.
Yeah, well, definitely. I want people to get out there and support it. I'm just looking at all of these questions. Like I said, I'm not capable of answering, but like, John, wasn't their jet a modified V1? Actually, no, it was more like a ME-163 and an ME-262. It was very similar to those types of jets. They had, I guess you could almost say, a modified V1 in the Oka bomb, and the Oka bomb is definitely going to be in the game. So but it's a piloted V1, exactly, the Oka bomb. Yeah, Robert got that. But so yeah, please go Kickstarter August 11th. There is a DVG Zero Leader page, so you can definitely come on there, ask questions. My wife will tell you I'm on there a lot. So if you have any questions or anything like that, I'm always there. I love answering questions. I love hearing comments, that type of stuff. So I'm very, very excited. My favorite parts, I really playing as the Japanese. I love the maneuver. Not a big fan of the robustness in some of the aircraft, but I love the maneuver. The mechanic is really good. Aggression is fun. It's just an added thing where you're getting, especially late in the war, you're going to use it a lot. These are just fun things. But what I like is when I get done with the campaign and I've got 2 airplanes sitting that are minor damage and I didn't get a chance to fix them or whatever, that just gives me the feeling of, oh my gosh, that is the way the Japanese had to face it, So those are the things I'm super excited. I'm super excited to have people play this game and see if they enjoy it half as much as I do.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I get excited about as a game player and as someone who does some videos and bits and pieces is seeing new designers and new ideas being presented, and having an established game company pick you up and endorse it and get it to marketplace doesn't happen very often, right? It's not as common as we would think. Most of the time, someone comes up with an idea, they're going to basically self-publish it, make it a desktop publishing game, and then eventually, 5 years later, someone will go, "Oh, gee, maybe I'll get that." So get that out to the marketplace. So I'm excited that that's happening for you, and that we're seeing a lot of new designers step up and bring some fresh ideas and new concepts and things like that, and look at things from the other side too, right? It's great to be able to play, the bad guys, and I don't mean that they weren't bad when I do that, but just play that get to play the bad guys. So that's also awesome. And
that's one of the things. Kevin and Sarah have been fantastic and very, very supportive of me when I came up with this idea. But one of the things that I wanted to do, you can look at it, but I wanted to make sure that I came to Japanese so that when you play the Japanese, you get a feeling for their spirit, for their toughness, for the fact that they are really an excellent fighter, an excellent group of people that just, I was proud to actually do their aircraft, and I hope I did them well, because, it's simple to make a bad guy bad, but they weren't bad people. They were good people doing their job, and they did it very well. And it's been a lot of fun doing it from this side. It really has. And I've got some other ideas percolating once this one is done. One from a bad guy's point of view and one from a good guy's point of view. So those are a couple ideas that are percolating.
Very cool. So what I will do for all the folks that follow the channel and follow the blog is, come August 9, 10, if you can get me some artwork or images and bits and pieces, I'll repost this video interview on my blog, and then post some new content to remind everybody that come August 11th that this is happening, and that we can give you a little
That'll
boost.
be fantastic. We'll work, and we'll get some more. We're working on it. The bandits now are done. We added the bombers, the B-29, and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Which actually, that's a nasty. The counter is nasty for B-29. If you've got a second, I can pull that back.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Let me. Should be down here on the bottom. Oh, there's the Oka, by the way.
Oh, yes. Can you zoom in? Let's have a quick look at that. Let's zoom in a little bit and have a quick little.
There's the Oka. Now, you notice this empty square down here on the bottom?
Uh-huh.
You can actually, the Oka comes with a pilot because it is a piloted aircraft, piloted rocket. But you can actually take one of your pilots that has a very high ATA or a high ATG. If you want to make sure you get a hit, you can replace the Oka pilot that came with it with your pilot. That's why this counter is larger. So you can choose one of your pilots out of your squadron if you really need to get a hit. Cool thing is, Oka has a range of 1, so it's not. You don't have to get to the target area. You can launch it from further out. Historically, the Americans figured that out and sent their combat air patrol out further. So don't be surprised if you start running into Corsairs and different kinds of stuff out further. Oh, this is the wrong one. It doesn't have the. It doesn't have my counter. Just a second. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries.
Can you see this counter?
Nope. If it's, I think if it's going to be in that browser, you're not going to be able to do it. You'll need to either be in a PDF or in a discrete JPEG viewer or something like that, image viewer.
It was a good idea.
That's all right.
So yeah, no, I like that. I like that background. And I want to say to Robert, your grandfather, cherry blossom medallion his friend brought home. That's pretty awesome. And if you're a keeper of it now, if you could take a picture, I think you and I might be friends on Facebook or not, but if you want to send it to DVG Zero Leader, if you could take a really cool picture of that medallion. Kevin and I were actually looking for stuff like that that we can put on our pilots or different kinds of stuff. So if you can get a picture of that, I would be hugely appreciative. That would really be cool.
Wonderful. I'm sure Robert, you can connect with Robert after this. We'll make sure that that happens. Well, good. Well, listen, Chuck, really cool to meet you again for the second time, but this time actually doing the interview live stream, and we got it to work, and it's all good. So thanks so much, and thanks for everybody for joining in. Great questions today.
Thank you very much for the questions.
Never ceases to amaze me the level of detail and knowledge that historical wargamers have about a given topic. No, it doesn't matter what topic I cover, anytime, anywhere, there's always going to be at least half a dozen guys who are like, oh, did you know that in 1941 on June the 7th that happened? Anyway, or the nuts and bolts of a particular piece of equipment. So it's all very cool. So thanks again, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll wrap it up. I appreciate it, Chuck.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who came and listened. And hopefully August 11th, you're at noon Pacific time. You're online and on Kickstarter and ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, good luck with it. I hope it all goes extremely well. I'm sure it'll be a great success. All the best.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, Kev.